Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you all for coming. One of the things I most like about being here, I moved here almost 3 years ago from the University of Maryland, and one of the things that I've really enjoyed is working with practitioners like Andrew. They have welcomed us into their professional home. I'm talking about sprawl, and more than the high cost of sprawl, I'm going to be talking about sprawl more generally, and I'm going to be keying off of this point-counterpoint that I think Andrew mentioned. I back in 1997 was asked to write a counterpoint to a paper by Peter Gordon and Harry Richardson entitled Are Compact Cities a Desirable Planning Goal? And their answer was no, they're not. Sprawl is good, compact is bad. So the editors of the Journal of the American Planning Association thought that their work was provocative but needed to be answered. So I wrote the counterpoint, and I'm going to go through and 14 years later kind of summarize where we were and where we are now. And I think the case for urban sprawl is dramatically weaker than it was 14 years ago. We know a lot more now than we knew then about the cost of sprawl. We've measured sprawl, as I'm going to describe to you, and we have related it to a bunch of bad outcomes. And we also know a lot more about cures to sprawl. So I'm going to talk about each of those. The characteristics of sprawl, the causes of sprawl, the costs of sprawl, and the cures for sprawl. So Harry and Peter and I disagreed about everything, pretty much, including our characterization of sprawl. And they took exception to my title. My title is LA County Sprawl desirable? And of course my answer was no, it wasn't. And they say the title of my paper is based on the wildly held but totally false misconception that Los Angeles is the exemplar of low density sprawl. Well, here you go. What do you think? And it sort of ends the conversation, doesn't it? Los Angeles has two characteristics that exemplify sprawl, and one is poor accessibility. This is the state of Florida's definition of sprawl, and so one characteristic of sprawl is poor accessibility, and that means you can't get to your destination in a reasonable travel time. The other thing is lack of functional open space, and I don't see any open space there. Los Angeles is medium density, medium even in places fairly high to medium density, but never-ending development. It just goes on forever. And there aren't the kind of peaks in density that make transit very effective and make walking a viable mode of transportation. This is 2001, 2002, hired by EPA to develop sprawl measures for the United States. And we define sprawl very broadly. And the first characteristic, low density, is the characteristic that Harry and Peter focus on. Los Angeles has higher density, believe it or not, in an average sense than New York does. Sprawl is also segregated land uses where homes are a good distance from shopping and even further from workplaces, and residential neighborhoods don't have schools nearby, and all these things. Poor accessibility due to segregation of land uses. So that's the second characteristic after low density. A third is lack of strong centers. We think of places like New York in terms of its centers, or Portland, Oregon in terms of its centers. It's downtown, it's town centers, it's transit-oriented developments, these centers of activity that are peaks in density amidst lower density. So we have peaking as we are hopefully going to have in about 30 years under the Wasatch Choice for 2040 plan. It's a plan that is based on the concept of centers, building up existing centers. And then the final thing is a sparse street network. If land uses that are widely separated from one another make one use inaccessible to another, so does a street network that isn't connected with lots and lots of cul-de-sacs and loop roads and so on, as opposed to a more gridded network. The grid, I live in the avenues, provides the ultimate in accessibility. I can go anywhere pretty quickly. I have alternative routes. I don't have to go way out of my way ever on any trip, where you do so often in the suburbs or in some cities that have hierarchical or branching street networks. So these are the four qualities. Other features, now density is one feature, and people react negatively, citizens do, in many parts of the country, to the concept of density. But density is only one characteristic. And there are other characteristics that are as important as density. And when you put those characteristics together with density, Portland looks like about the sixth most compact metropolitan area in the US, and Los Angeles is about average. So we've now developed measures of sprawl, and if you can measure something, you can study it, and you can look at it quantitatively and see how sprawl affects other things. So in Salt Lake, it turns out you may feel as though you live in a sprawling metropolitan area, and you tend to as you head south, but compared to other metropolitan areas, we're fairly compact. The average for all 83 metropolitan areas is 100. If you're above 100, you're more compact than average. And Salt Lake City is a little below average on density, a little better than average on mix, in centering, weaker. And you can see that. We've got a downtown that isn't particularly strong yet, and we don't have a lot of sub-centers. And street connectivity is pretty good. And it is until you go further south in the county. So overall, 110. But we also developed county sprawl measures. The four counties that make up the Wasatch Front region, they're very different from one another. So we wanted to be able to distinguish them, and we had 6 variables which we combined into a county sprawl measure. 4 of them related in one way or another to density, and 2 of them related to street connectivity and block size. The sprawl measures we developed back in 2001, 2002 have been used in a lot of health research and have been linked to all sorts of health conditions. And the darker colors here are the most compact, and the lightest colors are the most sprawling. And our metropolitan area doesn't do too badly when it comes to the county level sprawl. Here are the 4 counties: Weber, Davis, Utah, and Salt Lake, and this is the full set of metropolitan counties. And why would we be as compact as we are? Well, probably the mountains and water bodies, Utah Lake and the Great Salt Lake. Okay, so that's characteristics of sprawl. The second is causes. Gordon and Richardson and I disagreed on the causes of sprawl. And they tended to emphasize consumer preferences and technological innovations and kind of in an ancillary sense, government regulations. And I emphasized market imperfections, and I'll describe what I mean by that. Also, highway building. Highways themselves, we're talking superhighways, freeway highways, promote sprawl. So they said, Gordon Richardson said on consumer preference, low density settlement is the overwhelming choice for residential living. And I responded in the counterpoint, compact development can hold its own in the marketplace. So smart growth community is preferred by 56% of Americans. Now, the percentage of our actual development, new land development, that meets the definition of the smart growth community, community A, is probably around 5%. We've got all these other characteristics other than density that characterize sprawl, and it turns out that most people don't want to live in sprawl. If you say, do you want to live at lower density, they'll say, yeah, we want to live at lower density. But do they want strip commercial versus commercial in centers, like town centers or even shopping centers? Do they want disconnected streets that end in cul-de-sacs as opposed to more connected street networks? But what people want, I think, is reasonable density with good design. What the Urban Land Institute referred to in a book as density by design. This is some work I was part of in Charlotte, North Carolina, where people were shown neighborhoods and developments that are very, very popular and asked if they like them, and then told what the densities are. And people were surprised. Olmsted Park is at 7 units per acre, and yet it doesn't feel crowded. It's a nice place. The Fourth Ward is at 22 units per acre, that development right there. So people were surprised that well-designed density is really attractive. I started this conversation of causes. I said that Gordon and Richardson and I had a different explanation for the fact that we have so much sprawl. And I view the main cause as market imperfections. That is, imperfections in the real estate market. And those of you who have, and probably as most of you, have taken a course in microeconomics know that for a market to function perfectly and efficiently, it has to meet a number of conditions. There have to be many buyers and sellers. There can't be external costs or benefits. The goods have to be private as opposed to public. There has to be complete information and so on. And I would argue that the real estate or the housing market doesn't meet any of these conditions. Costs of sprawl, this is what was promised in the introduction, and I finally got to it. We differ very much in what we perceive as the cost of sprawl. Gordon and Richardson and I focused on transportation and travel. That's their interest, that's my interest, as the students here know. And they said suburbanization has been the dominant and successful mechanism for reducing congestion. And I said the award for the least defensible statement in a JAPA article goes to Gordon and Richardson. Congestion has increased everywhere, despite suburbanization. In other words, suburbanization hasn't reduced congestion, as they said. These are plots from the Texas Transportation Institute of something called the travel time index. It's the time it takes to get around during the peak hour divided by the time during the off-peak. And even Houston, which thought it could build its way out of congestion or pave its way out, eventually succumbed to congestion. In fact, of the 101 urbanized areas in the Texas Transportation Institute's database, 100 of them have seen increases in congestion between 1982 and 2009. You might think, well, you know, the sprawling areas have higher incomes than the compact. No, they really don't. We're talking in compact about Boston and San Francisco and so on. Incomes are actually higher. Ozone, a particular interest, obviously, with our air quality. And as the compactness index increases, ozone levels go down. And this was a kind of crude study we did. We didn't control for a lot of things. Since then, Brian Stone has studied ozone and found that, in fact, the compact metropolitan areas have cleaner air than the sprawling ones. So what doesn't vary between sprawling and compact areas? Well, congestion doesn't seem to. If you compare, again, using the same compactness index, measures of congestion like delay per capita and travel time to work, there isn't much difference between the sprawling and the compact places. You can't sprawl your way out of congestion, just like you can't pave your way out of congestion. Studying the effect of sprawl on all sorts of things. And I'm going to just mention a couple of them. One is traffic fatalities. We did this study in 2003 for the American Journal of Public Health. Urban sprawl is a risk factor in motor vehicle occupant and pedestrian fatalities, and that's the relationship, again, between the compactness index and traffic fatalities. People drive a lot less in compact urbanized areas, and they seem to drive slower, and the net effect is dramatically lower fatality rates. We did the first study in the, I think in the world, of sprawl and obesity and how sprawling development affects people's weight due to lack of physical activity, more time spent in cars, hence less discretionary time, and so on. And it got a lot of attention because it was the first. But what we found is if you compare Manhattan as the nation's most compact county, New York County, to Geauga County outside Cleveland, which was the most sprawling of all the counties, there was a 6.3 pound difference after controlling in weight, after controlling for people's income and education and race and age and gender and all those other things that affect your weight. So 6.3 pounds, not huge, but larger than the effects of some other things. So we looked at open space in another study. Gordon and Richardson, America's not running out of open space. As for the loss of open space, it's a classic case of public goods being undervalued. And I wrote with the National Wildlife Federation, I wrote the study Endangered by Sprawl. We have plenty of open space. If you fly over the Rockies, you see lots of open space. But in our metropolitan areas, we don't have a lot of open space. So if you judge it that way, we're not doing so well. Downtown revitalization, Gordon and Richardson were willing to write off downtowns. This was a while ago when downtowns weren't doing as well as they are today. I said at that point, many downtowns are coming back, and boy, has that proved to be the case. When I go out to conferences and that sort of thing, I always take photos, and there's always, in every place I've been anyway, a fair amount of downtown housing going up, like our City Creek, like the Granary District, like the Depot District, and so on, will be in the future. Energy, Gordon and Richardson, it's now well established that there's a global energy glut. And what I said was, while the best case has the real price of gasoline holding steady, it's the worst case I worry about. And in fact, we are a lot more dependent on foreign oil than we were in 1997. And the price per gallon of gas adjusted for inflation has doubled. So new findings, I'm going to just show you a few of them. This is from the 2010 sprawl measures Gail and I have developed. Compactness, again, along this axis, and this is vehicle ownership. And why is that important? Well, it's expensive to own a vehicle. It's like $8,000 per vehicle per year if you include insurance and the depreciation on it and all those things. This is compactness versus fatalities in 2010. Again, that strong relationship. This is compactness versus transit mode share on the journey to work, a strong relationship. Now there's scatter around the line, as there always is, but it's a very, very strong linear relationship. walk share on the journey to work, again. What doesn't seem to vary much is commute time. So that goes back to the point that Gordon and Richardson were emphasizing, that sprawl is a good way to reduce people's travel. Well, it doesn't look like that. If you look at body mass index versus level of compactness, living in a dense, compact county, you're going to weigh more, right? In other words, living in a compact place after you've controlled for income, race, age, gender, etc., has more impact on your weight than it did when we did our original study. Okay, cures for sprawl. This is going to be quick, and then I'm going to end with a story. Cures for sprawl. Gordon and Richardson want to institute congestion pricing. They acknowledge that the automobile is subsidized, and as economist planners, they think the solution is to eliminate the subsidy. And I think the solution is planning. So we differ fundamentally in that regard. We favor, I'm speaking for smart growth advocates, which I am one of. We favor getting prices right too, and we've promoted a lot of ways to do that, but we think we have to get the land uses right first and foremost. So it turns out that the American public seems to be with us on this. If you ask the American public, this is from a survey done for Smart Growth America, on their funding priorities, they want to put infrastructure dollars into existing communities. They want to spend money on green belts and greenways. They want to provide tax credits for urban revitalization. They want more money for transit. This is very consistent. More money for transit, even if it's at the expense of roads. So just a couple of little notes to back up the solution, my solution for these problems, which is better planning, and particularly land use planning. 22 states have passed land use laws since 1997. It became under Glendening, Paris Glendening, the governor of Maryland, containment of sprawl became a top priority of the National Governors Association. Ballot measures have passed in large numbers around the country, particularly for preservation of open space. And it's pretty impressive, the percentage of all the ballot measures for preservation of open space which have passed. And you've got a whole bunch of organizations that at least nominally support smart growth. And odd bedfellows, if you think about it. Sierra Club and the National Association of Home Builders. You wouldn't put those two together. Thank you.